Hi everyone, I'm Jack and today I'm here for the student room to talk about how to write a great essay. This is particularly for university students because I'm a university student, so I'm talking about what I've learned from my first year and the kind of tips and tricks that I'm going to remember as I go into my second year. But if you're an A-level student, some of these tips and tricks might also be quite useful, so don't feel that you don't have to watch because it's still going to help you in some way. So the first thing to do in terms of writing an essay is to start early. I think this is the best advice to give because essays can take a long time, and if you don't give yourself enough time, you're going to be even more stressed, and that's never good. As soon as you get the essay question or essay title, whatever you want to call it, start thinking about it. What kind of things could you write? What could be included? In a way, brainstorm what you already know as soon as you get the question. At my university, for my course, which is languages at Durham, we usually get the essay title at the beginning of term and then study the different topics throughout the term, and then the essay is typically due at the end of term, the final week of term. Because I already have the essay question at the beginning of the term, it means that I can start thinking about things, and then when I go to lectures I can always have that question in mind, and everything that the lecturer is saying I need to try and think how can it relate to the essay that I need to write. Also start reading early as well in terms of preparation. Things like primary texts, you really need to read them before they're covered in the lecture. And then secondary literature as well. Go to the library, go read around stuff because it will give you a broader understanding of the topic. And don't forget to write down what books you've looked in. You need to obviously reference properly at the end with your bibliography and everything, and you can't plagiarise. So make sure that you know where the sources are from. Usually you'll get a choice, so once you've decided on your essay title, the next stage is to start planning properly, not just brainstorming, but actually writing a detailed plan. I always find that the more detailed my plan is, the easier the essay is to write. When I did my A-levels for things like English literature, I never really thought that planning was important and I never used to plan. But since I've been at university and I have been planning, I've found essays so much easier to write. And when you do a plan, it means that your argument is very solid and secure. If you plan everything before actually writing the essay, you know where you're going with it, you know what you need to write and what you want to cover. And it also means that if you plan, you can typically stick to the word counts, because if it's like 2,000 words, you can plan enough for 2,000 words rather than not having enough or having too much. Now let's move on to the actual content of the essay. First thing, introduction. Probably the hardest thing to write because it's the first sentence, for example, that really strikes the person reading, and first impressions count. I usually find that it's a good idea to write the main body of the essay and then go back and write the introduction after, just so you know where you're going. But regardless of when you decide to write the introduction, one thing is so important, and it is that you say what you are going to argue. All of my lecturers in first year said that having a thesis statement was the most important thing because it says where your essay is going. So for example, I am going to argue that. That sounds very forced to say it like that. I don't personally like to use the I am going to in an essay, but whatever you're doing, make it clear that you are arguing something. If your argument's clear in the introduction, the lecturers know what to expect as they read the rest of your essay. They know where you're trying to go and what you're trying to prove. If you don't have your argument in the introduction, the lecturers won't really know what to expect as they read the main body of the essay. Also, don't forget to talk about how you are actually going to argue the point that you're making. For example, if you're doing an English literature essay or just literature in general, through analysing the characters of A and B, I am going to argue that whatever. You don't really have to use those terms exactly, but just make it clear what you are arguing and how you are doing it. Remember that an essay is not like a novel. It's not something where you suddenly surprise the reader in the middle of it and say, here's this brand new argument that I've never introduced before. It's not like that. No surprises, no cliffhangers or anything. It's not fictional. It's a piece of academic work. Make it clear what you're trying to do in the introduction so that the lecturer knows what to expect when they are reading. Don't surprise them halfway through. It won't impress them, it will confuse them, they won't know what's going on. So please make sure that your argument is clear at the beginning. In terms of the main body of the essay, it depends really what subject you're doing. But if you're doing like a literature subject or something, make sure that you are analysing all of the time in relation to the question. If you're writing about a book, don't just say what happens in the book. analyse what that means as well. They don't just want you to describe, they want you to analyse and evaluate. Say what you learn from the book, and particularly if it's a book as well, don't forget to keep mentioning your primary text, because that's the most important thing, and then support all of the arguments that you make with secondary literature. Don't forget as well to bring everything back to the question. I always did this at A-level because my teachers really drilled it into me that I had to keep using the words from the question at the end of each paragraph just to show that I was on task. It's really important to be always on point and focused when you're writing an essay. So everything that you write needs to be relevant to the question, bring it back to the question, use words from the question to make it really clear that you always have the question in mind. Then the final thing to wrap up your essay is the conclusion, and this is so important because just like with the introduction, where first impressions are important, final impressions are also very important in the conclusion. Bring everything together, bring all of the main points from the main body of the essay together, and then restate your argument. Your argument shouldn't have changed from the introduction, it should be the same kind of argument. You don't have to say it in exactly the same way. And usually arguments and conclusions are slightly more detailed because you can talk about what you've argued in relation to the points you've made in the main body of the essay. Obviously, when you get to the conclusion of the essay, the lecturer, examiner person has already read what you've said in the main body of the essay, so they kind of know what you're saying at that point. You just need to make it really clear what it is and end on a high. Once you've written the essay for the first time, done your first draft or whatever you want to call it, definitely read through it again, because usually you'll find mistakes or areas where you could improve, and definitely take time to improve them. Draft again and again, as much as you need to do. This is exactly why you need to start essays early, not just the night before. If you start the night before, you're not going to have time to draft again. Whereas if you do it a few weeks in advance, you've got a lot of time to edit it and improve it and get it really perfect. Don't forget as well to check all of your referencing and your bibliography. Make sure that you've used the system that your university wants you to use. Usually universities or departments will have handbooks where you can find about how to reference, how to do a bibliography, because there's very different systems and not every university is the same. So everyone, that is it for today's video about how to write a great essay. I really hope this helps some of you and you learned something. There's not really one set way to write an essay, and every essay is slightly different, obviously depending on the subject, depending on the topic that you're writing about. But you should definitely bear in mind all the things I've said today, because I know that those are the tips that stick in my mind from my first year, and as I go into my second year, I am definitely going to remember all the things I've said today. When I started my first year, the first essay I ever did got 62%, which was a 2-1, and then my final essay got 76%, which was a first. So I definitely think I improved throughout the year, and I learned a lot, and really that's what this video is about, just kind of teaching you what I'd learned and how I succeeded. If there's anything else you want to know about essay writing or university or anything, let me know down below in the comments. But until next time, thanks for watching, and I will see you all again later.